When I arrived at my son's wedding, I thought this would be the moment when everything would come together. The moment I would finally feel proud, accepted, and cherished by my family. But instead, I was greeted with cold indifference. I watched as my son Ryan and his fiancée Claire walked past me without a second glance, laughing and talking with their friends, leaving me standing there in the shadows. The joy in the air was palpable, but it wasn't for me. The music played, the guests mingled, but there I was alone. I had spent so many years pouring love and care into my family, expecting nothing more than a little acknowledgement, especially on a day like this. But it wasn't to be. I tried to hold back the sting, the deep ache in my chest as I found my seat, the one furthest from the bride and groom. I sat there silently watching as my son and his new wife shared intimate moments, their hands intertwined, their smiles so wide they seemed to radiate love, while I sat as a stranger in my own family. How did it come to this? How did the little boy I raised to be kind and caring turn into someone who couldn't even look me in the eye? I thought about how, years ago, this very moment would have been something different. I'd have been right beside Ryan, helping him through every decision, watching him as he took the next step into his future, proud as ever. But today was different. As the reception continued, I looked around, searching for any sign of warmth, any gesture to reassure me that I was still a part of this family. But no one even seemed to notice me. Every laugh felt like a slap in the face. Every joke made me feel smaller, less significant. I could hear the conversations around me, their voices muffled as I tried to focus on something, anything other than the growing emptiness inside me. How did I end up here? I had raised him with all the love I had, sacrificed my own happiness for his, only to be cast aside when it was my turn to be a part of his life. I watched as Ryan and Claire shared a dance, their eyes locked in a moment of pure connection, and I couldn't help but wonder if they had forgotten the woman who had been there for him every step of the way. The woman who had wiped his tears as a child, held his hand through the hardest times, and stood by his side when he needed guidance. Now, I was nothing more than a bystander in a life I had once been so deeply connected to. It hurt more than I could put into words, but I couldn't let them see it. No, I wouldn't let them see how deeply this cut. Instead, I smiled through the pain, the smile that had long since become a mask. I smiled as the bride's laughter echoed in my ears, as the dancing continued, as everyone else celebrated. But I was left alone watching from the sidelines. As the evening wore on, the feeling of exclusion only grew stronger. The music became a blur. The conversations around me became nothing more than noise. I found myself standing in a corner, hoping someone would notice, hoping that someone would come over and say something, anything to acknowledge that I was still here, still part of this family. But nothing came. Not from Ryan. Not from Claire. Not from anyone. It was as if I had vanished, a ghost in the middle of their perfect celebration. How did I become invisible? Was I truly that insignificant to them? As I watched Ryan laugh with his friends, I felt a tear escape my eye, but I quickly wiped it away, refusing to let anyone see me break. I wasn't going to let them win. I had spent too many years sacrificing for them to let this moment define me. I had to keep my dignity intact. I had to walk away from this wedding with my head held high, even if they couldn't see the pain that had taken root in my heart. But as I stood there watching them, something inside me shifted. The anger, the hurt, the confusion. It all started to bubble up. I couldn't just keep pretending that everything was okay. I had to confront this. I had to confront my son, the boy I had raised, the boy who now stood before me, too busy with his new life to notice his mother. I wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. This wasn't just about being excluded from a wedding. This was about the years of neglect, the years of being pushed aside, and I was done with it. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and made my way towards Ryan, ready to ask the one question that had been eating at me all night. Why? Why had he turned his back on me? But as I approached him, I saw the look in his eyes. That cold, distant look that told me everything I needed to know. He didn't care. And that was the hardest part to accept. That after all these years, after all the sacrifices, I had become nothing more than a burden to him. I stood there, in the middle of his perfect day, feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my entire life. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. This was not the family I had spent years building. This was a new family, one where I no longer had a place. And as the night wore on, I realized that I had to accept the truth. My son, the one I loved so dearly, had chosen his new life over me, and there was nothing I could do about it. As I sat there, still at that back table, the laughter and chatter surrounding me only grew louder, almost as if mocking my silence. The night should have been filled with joy, with pride, but instead, I felt as if I were invisible. Ryan was out there, enjoying the most important day of his life with Claire, his fiancée, and all their friends. I tried to remind myself that weddings are about the couple, but a small voice in the back of my mind kept whispering that this wasn't how it was supposed to be. My family was supposed to be together. It wasn't just about Ryan's happiness, it should have been about all of us. I had given everything for them, my love, my care, my time. But now I sat alone in the shadows of their celebration, a mere afterthought. It wasn't just about the wedding itself, it was the years that led to this moment, the years of subtle exclusion, the quiet distance that had grown between us. I had noticed the small things before. Ryan's delayed calls, his increasingly rare visits, the way Claire would always make sure she was the one who spoke for him. But I never wanted to face the truth. I had made excuses for him, told myself that he was just busy with his new life, that he was caught up in work, that Claire was just being protective of him. I had made every excuse in the book. But tonight, as I sat there, watching them dance and celebrate, I could no longer deny what had been staring me in the face for months, maybe even years. My son didn't need me anymore. I was a shadow in his life. I had always prided myself on being strong, on being the pillar of our family, the one who held everything together. But now I felt like I was slowly crumbling, like my foundation was giving way under the weight of their neglect. I thought back to the day Ryan was born, to the way I held him in my arms for the first time, the way his little hand would curl around my finger, trusting me completely. Where had that boy gone? The boy who once looked to me for comfort, for guidance, for love? I wondered if he even remembered those moments. I wondered if Claire had erased them from his memory. I didn't want to believe that. I didn't want to believe that my son had been so easily swayed by someone else. But tonight, the truth was undeniable. As the night wore on, I tried to make sense of it all, tried to convince myself that maybe I was overreacting, that maybe I was just being too sensitive. But as the evening continued, I realized that my feelings were valid. This wasn't just about a seat at the table or being part of the dance. It was about being treated with dignity, with respect, as someone who had once been the most important person in their life. I wasn't asking for attention, I wasn't asking for the spotlight. All I wanted was to be included, to be treated like a part of the family. But as the night went on, it became clear that I was no longer seen as part of their world. I was just a visitor, an outsider. I felt a growing sense of anger welling up inside me, but I quickly pushed it down. Anger wouldn't help. Crying wouldn't help. I had to remain composed, had to keep my dignity. After all, if I allowed myself to fall apart in front of them, they would win. They would see that they had succeeded in pushing me out, in making me feel like I didn't belong. But as the evening wore on, I couldn't ignore the deep ache in my chest. Every time I looked at Ryan and Claire, every time I saw them laugh and share a moment, it felt like a stab to my heart. I had spent years giving my all to this family, and now it seemed like they couldn't even spare a glance in my direction. When I was young, I never imagined that I would be treated this way by my own flesh and blood. No one ever tells you that this could happen. No one ever tells you that the people you love most can become strangers in the blink of an eye. I stood up slowly from the table, my legs feeling weak beneath me. I needed some air. I needed to escape the suffocating weight of this reality, to clear my head and stop the whirlwind of thoughts racing through my mind. I walked outside, finding a quiet corner where I could catch my breath. The cool night air hit my face, and for a moment I felt a little relief, but the emptiness didn't go away. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do now. Should I confront them? Should I demand an explanation for their coldness? Should I let them know how much they had hurt me? But then I realized something. I didn't need to ask for an explanation. I didn't need them to explain their actions. The truth was clear, and it had been clear for a while. My son had chosen his new life, his new family, and there was nothing I could do to change that. I had to face the painful reality that I was no longer part of his world, and that no amount of pleading, no amount of effort on my part, would bring me back into the fold. I took a deep breath and straightened my back. It was time for me to let go. It was time to stop chasing something that would never return. As I walked back to the reception hall, I felt a shift inside me, a quiet resolve. I wasn't going to beg for their love, for their attention. I wasn't going to be the person who spent the rest of her life wondering what went wrong. It was over. And as I walked back into the crowd, I knew that I was no longer going to be invisible. Not to them, but to myself. I had a choice. I could stay in this painful, empty place, or I could leave, find my own path, and rebuild my life. And for the first time that evening, I felt a glimmer of something else. A sense of freedom, a sense of possibility. Maybe it wasn't too late to find happiness again, even if it meant doing it alone. As I walked back into the reception hall, I could feel my heart beating faster, my pulse racing in a way that wasn't from the excitement of the wedding, but from the weight of the realization settling deep inside me. The night had already taken so much out of me, but I knew it wasn't over yet. The anger, the pain, it was all bubbling under the surface, threatening to break free. I told myself that I was done chasing after something that had already slipped away, but the hurt was still there, gnawing at me. I walked back to my seat, trying to avoid looking at Ryan and Claire, but it was impossible. They were still dancing, still laughing, their happiness so apparent, so in contrast to the emptiness I felt. The dance floor was full of their friends, the younger generation, and I was once again left on the outside, observing. I tried to focus on the food in front of me, anything to keep my mind from wandering back to the painful truth. But no matter how hard I tried, my eyes kept drifting back to my son. He was so far away emotionally that I couldn't even find him in the crowd anymore. I felt like I was watching a stranger. I couldn't help but wonder if he even remembered what it was like before all of this. Before Claire, before the wedding, before this new life he seemed to be living. Did he even remember the family dinners we used to have, the times we'd sit together and laugh, the way he used to come to me when he had a problem? I missed that. I missed him. But even more than that, I missed myself. I missed the woman who was once at the center of this family, who was loved and needed. Now I was just a shadow in their lives. The music continued, but it was like I was in a different world. A world where no one cared, no one noticed. I could feel the tears welling up, but I fought them back. I couldn't let them see how much this hurt. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. I had spent so many years taking care of everyone else, making sure their needs were met, putting my own needs on the back burner. And now when it was my turn to be cared for, to be acknowledged, I was left alone. I had become nothing more than a bystander in my own life. As the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the end. The end of the family I once knew. The end of the love I had spent so many years nurturing. There was no going back. I could see it in Ryan's eyes, in the way he interacted with Claire, in the way they moved through the evening together like a perfect couple, while I was left behind. He didn't need me anymore. He had moved on, and I was left to pick up the pieces of a shattered relationship. I stood up again, this time with more determination. I needed air. I needed to get out of there, away from the noise, away from the pain. I stepped outside into the cool night air, grateful for the silence. For the first time that evening, I allowed myself to breathe. It was strange how much quieter it was outside, how much easier it was to think without the distractions of the wedding, without the smiles and laughter of people who weren't thinking about me. But even in the quiet, the pain was still there, lurking just beneath the surface. I walked slowly, my thoughts a whirlpool of confusion, anger and sadness. Why had they done this to me? What had I done to deserve this? I had loved him, given him everything. And this is how he repaid me. With coldness, with indifference. I had been so sure that family meant everything, that no matter what, we would always be there for each other. But now I wasn't so sure. I was no longer part of their world, and I couldn't pretend that I was. I couldn't force myself to keep up the illusion that everything was fine when it was falling apart. I stopped walking, standing still for a moment, and let the cool night air wash over me. It was almost peaceful in a way. Maybe this was the moment I needed to change everything, to stop fighting for a place that was no longer mine. I had spent so many years trying to hold on to a family that was slipping away, trying to make things work, trying to keep the pieces together. But what if it was time to let go? What if it was time to stop pretending, to stop fighting for something that wasn't there anymore? I didn't have the answers, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep allowing myself to be treated this way. It was time to make a choice. I could stay in this world of hurt and rejection, or I could walk away and start over. And maybe, just maybe, I could find a new path. A path where I was valued, where I was seen, where I didn't have to fight for my place in the world. I turned around, heading back toward the reception hall, but this time it was different. I wasn't walking back to the same situation. I wasn't going to sit at that table, pretending to be fine while my heart broke inside. No, I was walking back with a new resolve, a new understanding. I wasn't going to beg for attention. I wasn't going to fight for a place that no longer existed. I was done. And as I walked back into that hall, I realized something. I didn't need them. I didn't need Ryan, and I didn't need Claire. I had spent my life giving to them, but now it was time to take something back for myself. Time to take back my dignity, my peace, and my future. I walked past the dancing, past the laughing guests, and I knew deep down that this was the last time I would ever let myself be pushed to the sidelines. As I left the reception hall, I felt a sense of finality that I hadn't experienced before. The cool night air hit my face again, but this time it felt like a weight had been lifted. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the pressure to keep up appearances. I didn't have to pretend to be the mother who was always there, always giving, always supportive. I didn't have to fight for their love anymore. I was free. But as I stood outside, I realized something that took me by surprise. I wasn't just free from their rejection, I was free from myself. Free from the person I had allowed myself to become. I had spent so long trying to fix things, trying to make everything right, that I had lost sight of who I was. I had sacrificed so much for them. My time, my energy, my happiness, and all it had gotten me was a broken heart. But no more. No more would I chase after people who didn't appreciate me. No more would I stand by, hoping for scraps of affection, hoping for a kind word or a glance. I had given them everything, and now it was time to take it back. I walked further away from the wedding venue, each step feeling lighter than the last. The anger, the hurt, the confusion, they were all still there, simmering beneath the surface, but they no longer had a hold on me. I wasn't going to let them define me. I wasn't going to let Ryan or Claire or anyone else make me feel small anymore. I had been a mother for so long that it was hard to remember who I was before that, but I needed to find that person again. The woman who had dreams, who had a life outside of being a wife and a mother. I had given so much of myself to them, but it was time to give something to me. I had worked hard my entire life, raising my children, keeping the family together. But in the end it had all been for nothing. I wasn't part of their world anymore. And I couldn't keep pretending that I was. As I walked, I realized that I had to accept the truth, that Ryan had moved on, and I was no longer a part of his life. I couldn't keep holding on to the past. It was gone and I needed to let go. It was hard, harder than I ever thought it would be, but it was necessary. I could feel my heart breaking as I walked away from the place that used to feel like home, but I knew it was the only way to heal. I couldn't keep living in a world where I wasn't wanted, where I wasn't appreciated. I needed to find my own path to rebuild my life. But even as I thought this, a part of me still clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, Ryan would come after me, that he would realize what he was losing. But then I caught myself. I couldn't keep waiting for him to come to me. I couldn't keep waiting for a son who wasn't coming back. I had to move forward, even if it meant leaving him behind. The walk was long, and by the time I reached my car, I felt exhausted emotionally and physically. But I also felt something else. A sense of peace, a sense of relief. It was over. I had made my decision. I wasn't going to beg for their love anymore. I wasn't going to chase after something that would never come back. I had to be strong for myself now. I started the car and drove away from the wedding, from my son, from the family that had turned their back on me. As I drove, I realized that this was the beginning of something new. I didn't know what that something was yet, but I knew that it would be mine. I wasn't going to let anyone else dictate my happiness. I wasn't going to let anyone else define who I was. I was going to start over. And maybe, just maybe, I would find peace along the way. The road stretched out in front of me, empty and quiet, but for the first time I wasn't afraid. I was ready for whatever came next. As I sat in my car, the world around me seemed both distant and too close at the same time. The streets outside blurred into the darkness, and I could feel the weight of everything that had happened pressing on me. The night had unfolded in a way I never imagined, and yet there was a strange calmness in my chest now. A sense of knowing that I was doing the right thing. I wasn't sure where I was headed, but I knew I had to go somewhere. I needed a break from everything, the lies, the hurt, the overwhelming sense of abandonment. It was as if the wedding had peeled away a mask, revealing a truth I had been too blind to see for years. My son Ryan no longer needed me in the way I had always been there for him. The realization hit me like a slow wave, washing over me until I couldn't deny it anymore. He had his life with Claire, and that life didn't include me. It was painful, but it also made me see clearly for the first time in years. I wasn't just a mother. I was a woman, a person with my own desires, my own needs. I had spent so many years putting everyone else before myself, trying to be the perfect mother, the perfect wife, the perfect everything. But now it was time for me to put myself first. As I drove, I thought about what I wanted to do next. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine. I didn't have to live my life based on the expectations of others anymore. For so long, I had been living in the shadow of my family's needs, always accommodating, always giving, always sacrificing. But now, I needed to learn how to live for myself. I thought back to the days when I was younger, before Ryan was born, before I became so consumed with being a mother. I had dreams, goals, things I wanted to do with my life. Somewhere along the way, I had put those dreams on hold, convinced that being a good mother and wife was the only purpose I had. But now, as the night stretched out before me, I realized that I could still have those things. I could still find happiness. It wasn't too late. I made a decision. I would go home, pack up the things I needed, and get out of this town for a while. I needed to breathe, to clear my head, and to find a place where I could be by myself. I wasn't running away. I was giving myself the space I needed to heal. The drive seemed endless, but there was a sense of freedom in it, in knowing that I wasn't bound by the past anymore. I wasn't tied to the family that had pushed me aside. I wasn't defined by their expectations. I could be anyone, go anywhere, and make my own choices. It could finally start living for me. When I reached my destination, a small town by the coast, I checked into a small, quiet inn. It was nothing fancy, but it was exactly what I needed. I walked into the room and took in the simplicity of it. The soft light from the bedside lamp, the comfortable bed, the view of the ocean just beyond the window. It was peaceful. It was everything I needed to unwind and reflect. I sat on the bed, my hands resting in my lap, and let the stillness wash over me. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. I wasn't worried about what anyone else thought of me. I wasn't worried about keeping up appearances or trying to make things work with a family that had clearly moved on without me. I was just me. And that was enough. I let out a deep breath and closed my eyes. I was starting over. The road to healing wouldn't be easy, but I was ready for it. I had spent too many years trying to make others happy. It was time to make myself happy. It wasn't selfish. It was necessary. I knew it would take time to let go of the hurt, to stop wondering what went wrong, to stop hoping that maybe Ryan would come around. But I also knew that I couldn't keep waiting for him to see me. I had to see myself first. As I lay back on the bed, I felt a small smile tug at the corners of my lips. It wasn't a smile of happiness, but one of relief. I had made it this far. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life. And that felt good. Tomorrow I would start planning. I would make decisions, big and small, that were for me. I would figure out who I wanted to be in this new chapter of my life. But for tonight I was content. For the first time in a long time, I was at peace with myself. It didn't matter that Ryan wasn't there, that Claire wasn't there, that the family I had worked so hard for wasn't there. What mattered now was that I was finally here for me. The morning came slowly, as the golden light filtered through the window, but it felt different. There was no rushing, no pressure to get up and check my phone for messages. No need to plan my day around anyone else's schedule. It was just me now. I stretched in the bed, feeling the comfort of the soft sheets, and I realized how long it had been since I had allowed myself to rest. The constant worry, the never-ending cycle of giving and hoping for something in return, it had all taken a toll. But now I was starting to breathe again. I had spent the past few days in this small town by the coast, and each day I felt a little bit more like myself. It was funny in a way. I had spent so many years thinking that my purpose was to be the mother, the one who held everything together. But now, without that role, I felt a quiet freedom, a freedom I hadn't known I needed. I made my way to the window and looked out at the ocean. The waves were crashing softly against the shore, and the sound was calming, soothing in a way that made me want to stay here forever. But I knew I couldn't. I had to move forward. I had to make a life for myself even if it meant doing it alone. As I stood there, staring out at the vast expanse of the sea, I thought about what I wanted. What did I want for myself now that the life I thought I had was no longer mine? The answer didn't come immediately, but it started to form slowly, like a dream coming into focus. I wanted peace. I wanted to feel whole again. I wanted to be seen not as someone's mother, not as someone's wife, but as me, Dorothy, a woman with her own thoughts, her own dreams. I had spent so many years pouring myself into others, and now it was time to fill myself up. I needed to rediscover who I was. I wanted to travel, to see new places, to do things that I had put off for so long, because I was always too busy taking care of everyone else. I wanted to find hobbies, things that brought me joy, and stop thinking about what everyone else needed. It was strange, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had options. I wasn't tied down by anyone's expectations. I wasn't waiting for Ryan to call or Claire to apologize. I was free. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this was exactly what I had needed. I didn't need closure from them. I didn't need an apology. I didn't even need their approval. I had been waiting for them to give me something I should have been giving myself all along: respect, dignity, and love. And now I could finally give that to myself. I decided to take a walk along the beach. The cool air, the sound of the waves, the salty breeze. Everything felt so different here. I hadn't realized how much I needed this until now. I had been so wrapped up in my role as a mother, as a wife, that I had forgotten what it felt like to just be me, to be free, to not be defined by anyone else. I looked out at the ocean and realized that it was like life. The waves never stopped, never asked for permission. They just came and went, always moving forward, always going somewhere new. And maybe that's what I needed to do. Move forward no matter how uncertain it seemed, no matter how scary. I couldn't stay stuck in the past, wishing for things to be different. The only way to go was forward. I made my way back to the inn, feeling a sense of determination I hadn't felt in a long time. I had a new goal now. It wasn't about making up for lost time with Ryan, or trying to repair the broken relationship. It was about making the most of the time I had left for myself. I had so much life left to live, and I wasn't going to waste it. I sat down at the small desk in my room and began to write. I wrote down everything I wanted to do, places I wanted to visit, things I wanted to learn, dreams I had put aside for too long. It wasn't a plan exactly, but it was a start. A start to a new life. And as I wrote, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. The anger, the hurt, the disappointment, they were still there, but they no longer had the power to control me. I was in control now. I was taking back my life. I didn't need Ryan to validate my worth. I didn't need Claire to apologize for the way she had treated me. I had to stop waiting for other people to change. The only person I could control was me. And from now on, I was going to live for myself. I knew there would be challenges ahead, that there would be moments of doubt, but I also knew I was strong enough to face them. I had made it this far. I had survived the years of neglect, of being invisible to the people I loved most. And now I was going to thrive. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but I was ready for it. I was ready to start living again. For the first time in a long time, I was excited about the future. And I was determined to make it my own. The days passed, and the small town by the coast became my sanctuary, the place where I began to rebuild the parts of myself I had neglected for so long. I started to explore, not just the town, but also the world within me that I had long ignored. I took long walks along the shore, feeling the sand between my toes, listening to the rhythm of the waves. Each step felt like a small victory, a step toward the freedom I had always craved but never fully allowed myself to experience. There was something liberating about being alone, about not having to answer to anyone, not having to explain myself to anyone. The world was mine to navigate, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of someone else's expectations on my shoulders. The anger that had once burned so hot in me began to cool. I had stopped waiting for an apology that would never come. I had stopped wishing for things to go back to the way they were because I knew now that they never would. I wasn't going to go back to the old life, the one where I was always second, always overlooked. I was moving forward, carving out a new path for myself. But as the days turned into weeks, something inside me shifted. I realized that the emptiness I had felt before, the loneliness, wasn't just a result of my son and his wife turning their backs on me. It was deeper than that. It was a feeling I had carried with me for years, even before the wedding. I had spent so much of my life trying to please everyone, trying to be what they wanted me to be, that I had lost sight of who I was, what I wanted. It wasn't just about Ryan anymore. It was about me, about finding myself again, about reclaiming the woman I had once been. I had been so focused on being a mother, on giving everything to my family, that I had forgotten how to be Dorothy, the woman who loved to read, who loved to travel, who had dreams beyond taking care of others. It was time to remember her. I started small, allowing myself the simple pleasures I had denied myself for years. I read books again, lost myself in stories that had nothing to do with my family or my past. I took up painting, something I had always wanted to do but never had the time for. Slowly I began to feel like myself again. It wasn't easy. There were moments when the loneliness crept back in, when I would think about Ryan and wonder if he ever missed me, if he ever thought about how I was doing. But those moments became fewer and fewer as I focused on my own growth. The more I embraced the freedom of my new life, the more I realized how much I had given up before. I wasn't just free from my family's expectations. I was free from the need for validation, free from the need to prove myself. I didn't need anyone else to tell me I was enough. I was enough on my own. One evening, as the sun set over the ocean, I sat on the balcony of my little inn room, a cup of tea in hand, and allowed myself to simply be. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace with myself. The hurt was still there, buried deep, but it didn't consume me anymore. It was just a part of my story now, not the whole of it. I had lived through it and I had survived. I wasn't defined by my pain anymore. I had learned that I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for. I had learned that healing didn't come from others. It came from within. It was something I had to do for myself, and I had done it. I had turned the page on a chapter that had caused me so much heartache, and now I was writing a new one. A chapter that was all mine, one where I was in control, one where I decided what came next. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the calmness settle over me. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time I was excited about it. I was ready for whatever came next, ready to embrace the next chapter of my life. It wasn't going to be easy, and there would be more challenges ahead. But I was ready to face whatever life threw my way, and to do it on my terms. I had found my strength again, and I was never going to lose it. As the night fell, I smiled to myself. I had made it. I had found my way back to me. The days passed, each one blending into the next, but I felt different. I was no longer defined by the pain of the past or by the family who had forgotten me. I had started to carve out a new life for myself, one where I made the decisions and where my happiness wasn't tied to anyone else. The small town by the coast had become my sanctuary, and I had slowly begun to embrace the quiet, the simplicity, and the peace it brought. I spent my days doing things I had never had time for before. Reading books, taking long walks along the beach, and even starting to paint again. Each stroke of the brush felt like a reclaiming of myself, of the woman I used to be, before I became a mother, a wife, and eventually an afterthought. There were moments, of course, when the loneliness crept in. It wasn't easy to shut off the memories, to pretend that the family I had worked so hard for didn't exist anymore. I still thought about Ryan, about what he was doing, about whether he missed me. But those thoughts became less frequent, less powerful, as I built a life that was my own. I began to realize that I had given so much of myself to them, to my family, that I had forgotten who I was. I had spent years living for others, making sure everyone else was happy while I was left behind. But not anymore. I didn't need their approval, their validation, or their love. I had found something more important, myself. As the weeks turned into months, I started to feel the shift within me. The anger that had once consumed me had faded, replaced by a quiet strength that I hadn't known I possessed. I wasn't angry at Ryan anymore. I wasn't angry at Claire. I wasn't angry at anyone. I had come to understand that their choices weren't about me, they were about them. And I couldn't control that. What I could control was my own happiness, my own peace. I had let go of the need to be part of their world. Instead, I had created my own. And it felt good. One day, as I was sitting on the porch of the small cottage I had rented, I received a letter. It was from Ryan. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized his handwriting on the envelope. I hadn't heard from him in months, and a part of me had wondered if I ever would. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened it, unsure of what I would find inside. The letter was short, but it hit me harder than I expected. He apologized. He apologized for everything, the way he had treated me, the way I had been pushed aside, the way he had let me go without a second thought. He admitted that he had been wrong, that he had allowed Claire to influence him in ways that he now regretted. He told me that he missed me, that he wanted to make things right. And for a moment I didn't know how to feel. Part of me wanted to forgive him, to take him back, to believe that everything could go back to the way it was. But then I remembered how far I had come, how much I had grown, and how much I had learned to live for myself. I had been waiting for his apology, waiting for him to come back, but I realized that I didn't need it. I didn't need him to come back to be whole. I had found my own peace, my own strength, and that was more than enough. I folded the letter carefully and set it down on the table. I didn't need to respond right away. I didn't need to do anything except take a moment to appreciate how far I had come. I had made it this far on my own, without their support, without their love, and I was stronger for it. I could hear the sound of the ocean in the distance, the waves crashing softly against the shore. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the sound soothe me. I didn't need anything from Ryan anymore. I didn't need him to apologize, to make things right, to make me feel loved. I had already given that to myself. The days stretched out before me, full of possibility. I didn't know where the road would lead, but I knew I was ready for whatever came next. I had learned that I could create my own happiness, that I didn't need anyone else to validate my worth. I could live my life on my own terms. I had spent so long caring for others, sacrificing my own dreams, my own desires, but now I was living for me. And as I stood there, looking out at the ocean, I realized that this was the beginning of something new, something just for me. As I sat on the porch of my little cottage, the sun slowly setting over the horizon, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction that I had not felt in years. The quiet, the peace, it was more than I had ever imagined. I had spent so many years living for others, catering to their needs, and here I was finally living for myself. It had been a long and difficult journey to get to this point. But now, as I sat there watching the sky change colors, I knew that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I had built a life for myself, one that was no longer defined by the expectations of others. I had learned to find happiness in the simplest things, the sound of the waves crashing against the shore, the warm breeze on my face, the soft glow of the sunset. For the first time in a long time I felt truly content. I had been afraid to let go of the past, afraid that if I did, I would lose everything that had once been important to me. But I realized that in letting go, I had gained something far more valuable. I had gained freedom. Freedom. From the pain, from the heartache, from the constant worry that I wasn't enough. I had let go of the need to be needed, and in doing so, I had found a sense of peace that I never knew was possible. The letter from Ryan still sat on the table unopened, but I no longer felt the need to read it. It didn't matter anymore. I had stopped waiting for him to come around, stopped waiting for an apology that would never come. I had stopped waiting for anyone to validate me. I had learned to validate myself. I smiled to myself, a small but genuine smile. It wasn't a smile of joy, but one of acceptance. I had accepted what was, and I had let go of what could never be. I was free. I knew that I could never go back to the way things were, but I also knew that I didn't want to. I had moved beyond that. The years of being pushed aside, of being invisible, of feeling like I didn't matter, they were behind me now. I didn't need to fight for my place in their world anymore. I had created my own world, and it was beautiful. The days that followed were filled with quiet satisfaction. I spent my mornings walking along the beach, my afternoons reading and painting, and my evenings watching the sunset. I had learned to enjoy the small moments, the simple pleasures, that I had once taken for granted. Life was no longer about pleasing others or meeting their expectations. It was about me. I had learned that happiness came from within, and I didn't need anyone else to provide it. One afternoon, while walking along the beach, I met a woman who had recently moved to the town. She was in her 60s just like me, and we struck up a conversation. We talked about the town, about life, and about the choices we had made. She shared her own story of how she had moved here after a difficult divorce, how she had spent years rebuilding her life, just like I had. As we talked, I realized how much I had in common with her. She had also found a way to reclaim her life, to find peace and happiness after years of turmoil. It was a reminder that I wasn't alone, that there were others like me, women who had spent their lives giving to others, but who had finally found the strength to live for themselves. That conversation sparked something in me. I realized that I wanted to help others, to share my story and show them that it was never too late to start over. I had spent so many years feeling like I had lost my chance at happiness, but I had found it again. And I wanted to help others do the same. I started volunteering at a local community center, helping women who were going through difficult transitions just like I had. I shared my story with them, listened to theirs, and together we helped each other heal. It was more fulfilling than anything I had ever done. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a purpose again. But this time it was a purpose that was all mine. It wasn't about my family, it wasn't about anyone else's expectations. It was about me, about using my own experiences to make a difference in the lives of others. I had found a new kind of love, a love for myself and for the people around me. It was the kind of love that didn't require validation, that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. It was the kind of love that came from within, from the strength and resilience I had built over the years. And as I stood there looking out at the horizon, I realized that I had finally found peace. I was no longer a woman defined by her past, by the mistakes and regrets that had once held her back. I was a woman who had reclaimed her life, who had found her own path, and who was ready to live it fully. And for the first time in a long time I felt truly free.